Good morning and welcome. Meeting is called to order. I will acknowledge Commissioner Levy and will be joining to begin our business. I'll call for motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of May 11th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. I'll turn it to Curtis for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Woo. Good morning, everybody. Woo. In person. Really jubilant to see everyone in person, and commissioners, a few of you for the first time here. Really happy to see you as well. Just great to be here. I do think we hoping behind me I might see there it is, our new mission. We've put the mission in a couple of places inside the building, and most of the commission approved our strategic plan and new mission here in the course of the last year. And it's just a real treat to get started again in person and to be thinking about what we're here for, why we get up and come to work, and what it means for our community. So really nice to see that up there for the first time. I do want to give a shout out to the new employees in the office. Hi, everybody. Long time no see. It's been 8 or 9 minutes since we've seen each other, but really a treat to have you here today. We had a nice conversation this morning about the opportunity and honestly the joy that the commissioners and executive team and I feel in having a bunch of new people here in the organization helping us get better and enriching us in every way. So really great to see you. I do want to acknowledge the Port's safety champions up here on the screen. Once again, people from throughout the organization really trying to make the place we work safer for themselves, for their coworkers, for our community. It's really on all of us to do that, and I want to just thank the team and these particular safety champions this month for going that extra mile. Stan, would you start us this morning with a safety moment?
Glad to. My message today is that the board is exercising our membership with the National Safety Council by promoting the National Safety Month 2022 campaign. Observed annually in June, this year focuses on reducing workplace safety concerns, key injury generators, and timely areas of emphasis. We are highlighting an emphasis topic each week in June with our leadership supervisors, safety committee teams, construction project teams, and our tenant safety advisory group. Week 1, we're going to cover musculoskeletal disorder injuries, or MSDs. MSDs are a leading cause of workplace injury and cost billions each year in workers' compensation and lost productivity. We are sharing the latest resources and practical tools within our organization and offering ergonomic safety checks. Week 2, we're going to cover workplace impairment. We all know the dangers of substance use on the job. More recently, mental distress, fatigue, and life stresses are also recognized as impairing workplace safety. We're providing resources to recognize the signs and address impairment in all of its forms. Week 3 will cover injury prevention. In 2020 alone, more than 4 million workplace injuries required medical attention in the U.S. We are providing learning opportunities about approaches to preventing occupational injuries and illnesses, including identifying hazards, assessing risks, and mitigating unsafe conditions. And then in week 4, we'll cover slips, trips, and falls. These incidents are the #1 hazard in many workplaces and industries. The court recognizes that these injury drivers can be controlled. Proper designs, awareness, and safe behaviors. We'll focus on tools and technology to reduce our slips, trips, and falls during this week. Within the port, we are relentlessly monitoring safety metrics and making continuous improvements. We've completed significant organizational learning over the last 12 months and are using the data to inform our safety plans going forward in fiscal year 2023. As we do every year in June, the Port will engage all employees to recommit to a zero harm workplace for themselves and their coworkers by completing our safety and health policy e-learning course narrated by our own executive director, Curtis Robinholm. Curtis, that's our safety message for today.
Thank you, Stan. Appreciate it. I miss being on the overhead speaker in PDX. So anytime I get the chance to put my own voice on something, hi, I'm Curtis Robinholm. Really appreciate the safety message this morning. Thank you. This next item is a little bittersweet for me, Madam President and Commissioners. In my previous role before coming to the Port of Portland, I was Governor Kitzhaber's Chief of Staff, and I had the good fortune of helping recruit candidates to become Port Commissioners. And one of my sort of great trophies on the wall was I was able to convince Bob Levy to become a commissioner at the Port of Portland. That was in 2013, May of 2013, and Bob has served the port for the last 9 years. The governor asked him to stay on an extra year while she worked on a replacement. This is Bob's last day as a commissioner of the Port of Portland. The state legislature voted last week to fill a couple of vacancies on the one vacancy, and Bob's been waiting, I think, to leave as soon as he could for the last year or so, right, Bob? But I asked the team to assemble for me the things that we did in Bob's 9 years, and then I had to ask them to get it down to one page because it's just been a very active 9 years. And Bob, just on behalf of the Port team and our employees and our community, I really want to thank you for your guidance and your friendship. The list is long. It includes, by the way, Executive Director Recruitment, General Fund Sustainability Push, PDX Workplace Initiative, entering in and getting almost all the way through PDX Next, the biggest construction effort in the port's history, securing air service to London and Mexico City, as well as cargo service to Asia. The list goes on and on. Also, really importantly, securing the future of Terminal 6. Bob played a big role in helping us think through how to get Terminal 6 to a place that is both sustainable and serves our importers and our exporters in the region. We've done a lot of work around property development, FedEx and Amazon, and our ongoing work out at Gresham Business, social equity policy, and really helping us think about what shared prosperity means for communities not in the Portland metropolitan area and how we can help think about what people earn in jobs that are connected in one way or another to support. So Bob, thank you very much for your service. I'm sorry you're not here to receive the traditional blanket in person, but we do have one jetting its way to you. Thank you very much for your service to Oregon and our community, and we're very grateful. Bob's tempted to get mad at me now. Don't do it.
I'd like to say a few words. I won't take up too much time. I probably will always hold a grudge against Curtis for talking me into staying such a long time on the Port of Portland, but it's been a wonderful experience. And I think the list you read, the really important part about it is that the staff has accomplished all those things for the port over the last 8 or 9 years, and they've really been significant and mostly in the last 4 or 5 years, and certainly since Curtis has been there. So I want to, the direct reports to Curtis certainly have just surpassed all of my expectations, and I'm sure surpassed the expectations of many people in the public and certainly many of the commission members. But it's been a great experience. When I got there, I kind of thought the Port of Portland was, I didn't realize how big it was. And I think the footprint of the port, not only in Portland, but around the state, is extensive, and it's been a wonderful learning experience. And I appreciate all of you helping me learn about the port. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And maybe, Madam President, I'll just keep plowing through my remarks here. I do want to note Governor Brown, and confirmed by the Senate, I mentioned last week, Katie Koba, who's the state's chief operating officer at the Department of Administrative Services, has been appointed to the commission. as has Rochelle Luther, who's Columbia Sportswear's Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs and Chief Human Resources Officer. So really excited to have two new commissioners next week. Look forward to welcoming them. On to a few other news items. Last month, we did receive a $7.5 million Connect Oregon grant from the Oregon Department of Transportation for Marine Terminal 6 capacity project. Really excited about that work. As I think everyone knows, T6 has really played a key role in alleviating supply chain challenges on the West Coast. And we're really looking forward to continuing our improvement effort out there at T6 on the facilities. We're hosting an Environment Day, and it's called Environment Field Day for Willamette Cove on June 25th. Our partners there are the State of Oregon, the Division of State Lands, City of Portland, Metro, and the Portland Harbor Community Coalition, PHCC. It's really a community-shaped event to increase Portlanders' understanding of the sampling activities taking place both at Willamette Cove and in other parts of the lower Willamette. The goal is really to build understanding and trust. So it's just a really great piece of work, and really appreciate the community leaning in and working with us to develop that project. We did have 2 weeks ago, International Trade Week. I really appreciate the support of our own Commissioner, Catherine Lam. We invited Vietnamese Consul General Nguyen Trac Ton and his trade team from the San Francisco consulate to visit Portland during International Trade Week, and set up a separate event with a lot of the trade and traded sector community. Thank you, Commissioner, for your leadership there. It was a terrific event. The morning after the Celebrate Trade event was a roundtable hosted by Commissioner Lam, and it just went really well. It was nice actually to see people in person and talk about the real opportunity that Vietnam represents for our region. We do have at PDX several new flights starting or having started. Amsterdam began about a month ago. Last week, we celebrate British Airways. Direct to London Heathrow had a really nice event with the community, and then also out at the gate last Friday. It's a Boeing Dreamliner. It's a gorgeous aircraft. It's the first regular service of a Dreamliner to PDX, so we're really excited to have that flight. I did note yesterday that we also had Toronto Keith started yesterday or the day before, direct service, which is also just great for our community. PDX received last week from the Portland Business Journal for our work on Concourse B and the new rental car facility, the 2022 Transformer Award, really about leadership in construction and new buildings. So really grateful for the team, the whole PDX Next team, maintenance, everyone connected to that work. Just really proud of the commitment that those projects represent to the region. So with that, Madam President and Commissioners, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Curtis. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Commissioner Levy for his service. I know he has been a great mentor to me in helping me understand sort of the history of the port more broadly, and also to think about how the port and its operations really impact the state more broadly and not just the metro region. Your voice has been really important to our community, Bob, and I thank you for your service on the commission. With that, I'll ask if anyone has any comments or questions on the executive director's report or remarks. Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the executive director's report. Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passed. We didn't receive any public comments for this meeting, so we'll move on to the general discussion item. Curtis, if you could help us introduce that.
Great. Here is that. Oh, Greg's online. Great. So commissioners, for background, the administrator of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, Greg Johnson, is going to update you today on the Modified Locally Preferred Alternative, or LPA. We've talked about this in the past for the I-5 bridge replacement. This update is in preparation of the Port Commission endorsing the Modified LPA in the July meeting. And so the idea is to give you a chance to talk with Greg, ask him any questions you have, let him update you on the thinking and the scope. I'll just note, having been involved in this project for far too long, 10 or 12 years now, that Greg has really brought great energy and focus. He's really helped bring the community together around what can get done instead of sort of all the reasons things can't get done. And it's been a real joy to work with him. So I look forward to his presentation today. And Greg, if you're ready to go, I'll hand it over to you.
I am. Good morning, Madam President, members of the Commission, Executive Director Robin Holt. It's my pleasure to be here. For the record, my name is Greg Johnson. I'm the Program Administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. But before I jump into my presentation, I do want to tell you I am one of your customers. I fly in and out of PDX on a very regular basis. And I've flown out of every major and sub-major airport in the United States. And I want to tell you how much I enjoy flying out of PDX. PDX is a great experience. Even with the major construction project going on, the airport is a joy to fly out of. So wanted you to hear from one of your customers. So I am here this morning because we are at a critical point in our program for the replacement of the interstate bridge. We are seeking to reach alignment around a locally preferred alternative. And what this is the pillars of what we will take into the more detailed study in the supplemental environmental impact statement process. So this is once again, a critical phase, and we wanted to make sure all of the boards and councils of our partners, which the Port of Portland is one of our key partners, have an update so you can ask questions and make sure that you have no unanswered questions or concerns about where we're at. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is our program timeline. You have seen this slide in my previous presentations. So we keep moving that gray line that's currently in the middle of the environmental process. So we are, it recognizes the prior work that was done, the relaunching of the program, and the progress we have made to date. So this is, we are still on course and on schedule to begin construction of a new crossing, of a new 5-mile corridor in late 2025. So this is an important step in getting us there. So let's go to the next slide, please. So as you know, the Governors Brown and Inslee signed a letter of intent in 2019. I was brought on as program administrator in July of 2020. 2 years have absolutely flown by. We've been doing a tremendous amount of work in that time period. We have $90 million in combined funding between Oregon and Washington. And also we have a commitment from the state of Washington that has allocated $1 billion for the actual construction of this bridge. So we will be coming to the Oregon legislature in their 2023 session with a very similar ask that will fill out the remainder of the local share that's necessary for us to start attracting federal dollars and determine how much tolling will play a part in this effort. So one of the things that's different than the last go round, we have a bi-state legislative committee that we meet with on a regular basis. The last number of months, we've been meeting twice a month. So we are, our mantra with those folks are no surprises. So we've been keeping them up to date, and we've been hearing their input in real time as we are shaping what this program looks like and what they are willing to fund going forward. So these are the 10 partners. So ODOT and WSDOT are jointly leading the program. I'm a shared resource between the two DOTs. You see both transit agencies, TriMet and C-Tran, are key partners, along with Oregon Metro and Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council. Both cities and both ports make up the 10 partner agencies seeking to get this work done this time. Let's go to the next slide, please. So one of the key issues in any federal project that has federal dollars in it is the purpose and need. And these 6 statements speak to why we are looking to replace the current I-5 bridge over the Columbia River. Number 1 is safety, the narrow lanes, no shoulders, poor sight distance, bridge lifts, the nearness of the ramp merging and diverging contributes to accidents. This is the highest crash location in the state of Oregon. It is in the top 5 for the state of Washington. Impaired freight movements. We've been having a very in-depth conversation about the needs, the current needs and the future needs of freight movements through this corridor. And we are also emphasizing that although folks see this as a local connector between Portland and Vancouver, this is the only interstate that runs on the West Coast between Mexico and Canada. So it is a critical economic trade corridor, not only for this region, but for the United States and internationally. So congestion is the third purpose and need that has to be solved. There are over 143,000 vehicles. We have 7 to 10 hours of congestion per day. Traffic has just about bounced back to the pre-pandemic levels. So this 143,000 is 2019 numbers. So we will be continuing to monitor how traffic is coming back and growing in this region. One of the key elements of this project is the earthquake vulnerability. We know that with the Cascadia subduction sitting off the coast of Oregon, the 2 tectonic plates that move every 250 years and produce a major earthquake, those plates have not moved in a significant way in 300 years. So we are looking at how can we have a resilient transportation infrastructure and survive a large earthquake. Currently, we don't know that the existing bridge would survive a magnitude 7 level earthquake or above. This is one of the key elements in the urgency in getting this done. So we are also looking at the inadequate bike and pedestrian paths. Now, I count every time I walk across the bridge. So yesterday constituted my 14th walk across the bridge over to Hayden Island and walking along those shared paths. And yesterday was the first time I did it without headphones on. And it is a loud, noisy, dirty trip. It is not something that attracts folks to want to do it on a regular basis. So we're looking at how can we make this mode of transportation, bike, walk, and roll, more attractive to take people out of single occupancy vehicle trips going across this corridor. And finally, there is limited public transportation. We know that currently C-Tran operates an express bus that goes from Vancouver to downtown Portland. We know that we can do better. So we are looking at solving this as we are solving these other 6 issues. So next slide, please. So this is how we are oriented to solve the problems and address the concerns. So this is our how the groups align and how they give feedback to the program and how we receive input from the public and our equity advisory group rather, and also other entities that have input on this. So You see at the bottom, we have an equity advisory group as well as a community advisory group. We had over 500 individuals apply for a little more than 25 slots on those two committees. Those committees have been meeting monthly for a year and a half now, giving us input and looking at our processes, looking at our outcomes to make sure that it reflects the will of the community, as well as that our processes and our outcomes are equitable. The executive steering group, that's the group that Executive Director Robin Holt sits on, representing the Port of Portland to that executive steering group. And on the right side of that, you will see the other decision makers. We have federal funding agencies such as Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Authority, or Federal Transit Administration rather. We also have the United States Coast Guard, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that we will be seeking permits from. We also we will be having in-depth conversations with the Federal Aviation Administration as far as the height of the bridge and not interfering with PDX flight plans nor Pearson Airfield. And at the top is the Bi-State Legislative Committee, once again providing that oversight and guidance to the team, and we are keeping them updated on a very regular basis on all of our activities and what we are hearing from the community. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we heard early on was that equity and climate are key priorities for this region. So we are looking to maximize benefits and minimize burdens for communities of concern that have been burdened with large transportation or large infrastructure projects in the past. So we know that the BIPOC community, people with disabilities, communities with limited English proficiency, persons with lower incomes, houseless individuals, immigrants, refugees, young people, and older adults generally have not had a voice at the table for projects of this magnitude. So we have done a purposeful outreach to these communities. We are supporting that by putting all of our information out in 10 written languages and 8 spoken languages. We are centering these communities for engagement and feedback and oversampling them to make sure that their voice is reflected in what goes on this project. We also know that we have to be in alignment and support of the state climate goals in each state for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. We know that currently the current bridge is with the congestion levels currently is producing greenhouse gases at an unacceptable rate. So we are looking to solve and reduce the congestion levels in this corridor. We're looking to operate this area more efficiently and effectively. And we're also looking to make sure that this infrastructure is resilient for future climate disruptions. And as you are well aware, it was almost a year ago that we had the heat dome settle in over the area that was very disruptive to transportation. We had buckling freeways, we had overheated overhead catenary lines for transit. We had buses that were overheating. So when we build this this piece of infrastructure, we want to make sure that it is built so it can sustain river levels that may rise in the future, as well as the heat that will be expected to come in more frequent occurrences. So this is going to be a priority to make sure that we build something that is resilient, that won't have to be shut down during any type of extreme weather event. Next slide, please. So our community engagement is probably the element of our program that I am most proud of. We have done just I think a robust job of reaching out and making sure folks know about the program. They have opportunities to give us input. We've mailed over 100,000 postcards to zip codes within the program area. We have a monthly newsletter that reaches probably now close to 7,000 subscribers. We do our advertisements in digital print in multiple languages. We've been interactive with all media outlets. Our presence in social media has been tremendous. We have a website that has been recognized nationally as a model for a mega project website. So our engagement methods have, once again, we restarted this program in the midst of a pandemic. So all of our meetings in the beginning were virtual. We still are hosting virtual public meetings, and we are now starting to go to hybrid type engagements. So we have had community working groups with over 80 different community members, online open house, community briefings, surveys. We've had over 18,700 survey responses received with, I believe, close to 30,000 questions or inputs from those surveys. So once again, we are continuing to do community presentations, and we continue to do listening sessions. That's one of the key elements, is making sure that we are listening to the partners, listening to the community on what their priorities are. Next slide, please. So the modified locally preferred alternative, that's a mouthful. So what this is a high-level identification of the pillars of this program, of what we plan to study and eventually build. So once again, we are looking at things such as the mode for high-capacity transit, the alignment for transit, other elements such as the number of lanes across the bridge. We are, this is getting us to the point where we can start narrowing down what we are looking at and start putting together estimates that speak to what will eventually get built. So once again, this is a specialized term used by the Federal Transit Administration, and it's a key component as we are pursuing capital improvement grant funding. And it's a key element in the NEPA process for the Federal Transit Administration. So this is also an early agreement by the local agencies of what it is we are going to build and what it is we're not going to build. So what it is not, it's not a fully defined alternative. There is a lot more study to do, and that SDIS is an acronym for Supplemental Draft Environmental Impact Statement. So it's we will be doing much more study, much more data analysis. So it's also not a final design. These are concepts. We're probably at 1.5% to 2% design overall. So we have a tremendous amount of more detailed work to do as we look at impacts, mitigation, and avoidance for what we are hoping to build. Finally, this is not the end of technical analysis. This will be continuous as we move forward. We have to keep on top of what the latest trends are in the industry. As smart vehicles are making more space on roadways, we have to make sure that what we design takes care of present issues, but also is looking to the future and looking at what those future conditions may be. And this also is not a final approval. As we get through the supplemental draft environmental impact statement, there will be an opportunity for all of the partner agencies to have a voice in what that looks like and what that final approval that will give us an amended record of decision going forward. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a graphical representation of the modified locally preferred alternative. And so these are the decisions that we are putting forward, that we are hoping to receive an endorsement to move us into that next phase to study in more depth. So the first thing you will see is we are looking at a partial interchange on Hayden Island rather than a full interchange. So we heard from the residents of the island, they would like to see a lighter footprint on Hayden Island by I-5. And with the Port of Portland's decision not to pursue development on the west end of Hayden Island, that opened up some opportunities to address the concerns of the community, both the business community as well as the residents who live on the island, to have this smaller footprint. So this, you will see there is a exit ramp from northbound or from southbound I-5 to the island, and a ramp from the island to northbound I-5. The other movements to get to and from Hayden Island will be taken up in the Marine Drive interchange. And I've given folks the example, this is like a water balloon. When you squeeze one end, and the end we're squeezing is the Hayden Island end, that bulges out onto Marine Drive and makes Marine Drive more complex and more movements there. So the gray line that you see just to the right of I-5 is a local access bridge that will allow the residents of Hayden Island to reach Hayden Island and to reach mainland without going on to I-5. And so that's a key feature of this partial interchange. You will also see that yellow line on the left side of the drawing. This represents an extension of light rail from the Expo Center that will have a station on Hayden Island, and that will cross the river and have a station on the waterfront in Vancouver, as well as a terminus station not to go further than Evergreen Boulevard in the city of Vancouver. So we have been working closely with the transit agencies to create a combined system where Bus Rapid Transit in Vancouver will feed the light rail system and will take the best that each system has to offer as far as moving the most people with the shortest ride, with the shortest number of transfers. So that is one of the key elements. The third is the auxiliary lanes, and that is currently one of the most controversial issues that we are hearing feedback on during this process. So right now we are studying or proposing to study one auxiliary lane in each direction. That is not making folks happy who want to see a larger bridge for future conditions. So what we know we have to do is we have to satisfy all of those 6 purpose and need statements. So by studying one auxiliary lane in each direction, this will, if it does not meet purpose and need, we have the option to study a second auxiliary lane in each direction. So we wanted to start off with the smallest footprint that has the least impact on more homes and businesses. And finally, we will be looking at variable rate tolling to help pay for the bridge. And also a secondary benefit is to help manage traffic. But at the bottom, you will see some of the benefits of this modified locally preferred alternative. We're putting 3,000 plus more residents within a half-mile walk of what will be new transit stations. The access to jobs increases significantly for people with disabilities, people of color, the general population, as well as low-income populations. And just the mode shift that we would anticipate from folks who will now take light rail instead of driving in a single occupancy vehicle trip, we anticipate a reduction of greenhouse gas to the tune of 36,000 metric tons per year, the equivalent of 89,400,000 miles driven by gas-powered cars. So this is significant, and this is not the only thing we're looking at for climate benefits from this project. This is only the first step that we have identified how we will be reducing greenhouse gases. So let's go to the next slide, please. So other components, we know that this is not going to be a tunnel. We know that we have looked at in depth the other ideas surrounding how this the problems could be solved in this corridor. So we know that this will be a bridge with 3 through lanes northbound and southbound, which match the northern and the southern limits of this project. We also know that we are seeking not to build another lift span. We're looking to have a comprehensive multimodal network that will move people in ways that they choose rather than ways they are forced to go through this corridor now. So we're looking at safe and comfortable active transportation. This will be one of the largest investments or single investments in active transportation in this region. We are looking at the replacement of the North Portland Harbor Bridge. That's currently the bridge that carries I-5 from the south side of Hayden Island to the Marine Drive area. So before that bridge was looked at as being seismically retrofit, in the 15 years that has passed since that decision, it is now not economically feasible. So once again, we are assuming variable rate tolling for funding, but also to help manage congestion and improve the multimodal mobility through the area. And finally, the improvements to the 7 interchanges within this program corridor are integral to making this corridor work appropriately. Generally, in a corridor of 5 miles, you would see a maximum of 3 interchanges. We have 7 interchanges. So we have to modernize those interchanges and make them work. The auxiliary lanes is a part of that modernization, so folks can merge and weave onto the freeway, along with the freight movements getting up to speed before entering through traffic. So next slide, please. So right now, we still have a conceptual cost estimate with a range of 3.2 to 4.8 billion. As we adopt a modified locally preferred alternative, we will be able to take and shape this estimate in a much more detailed way. We are also aware of the escalation that's happening with projects, not only in this region, but across the country and the world. So we will be looking at those elements to put together a estimate that will give us comfortability that we are in the right ballpark as far as the dollars needed to get this program built. We will be pursuing a number of different sources. I've talked about the state sources, both from the state of Washington and the state of Oregon. There are federal grant programs that came out of the legislation that was passed and signed by the president last fall that we will be pursuing. So those, we will be writing those grant applications in 2023 as soon as we know what our local commitment is. We will also be pursuing Federal Transit Administration capital investment grants as well. So next slide, please. So once again, variable rate tolling, we are looking to make this equitable. There are some folks who have to travel across this bridge to go to work every day, and they can't vary their times when they're going to work. So we have to make sure that we are addressing those concerns and that we are being equitable for low-income folks who have to travel across this bridge every day. So this program does not set policy. That policy will come from the Oregon Transportation Commission as well as the Washington State Transportation Commission. So we are working with them, and we will be putting together recommendations of best practices that we have seen both locally as well as nationally and internationally that can look at this tolling issue. So once again, the soonest tolling could begin is late 2025, 2026, and this is what's called pre-completion tolling that will once again help to raise funds to pay for the remainder of this bridge. So next slide, please. So this is the timeline we're looking at. We are in the process of gathering feedback from the partner boards and councils. This is a part of that process, me being here this morning. We are also hoping that in our July meeting with the executive steering group, that the boards and councils will give their steering group members the ability to say yes to this locally preferred alternative. On that same day, we will be before the Bi-State Legislative Committee with the same ask of an endorsement to move this forward into the next step. So as we, if that is approved, we will be beginning the supplemental draft environmental impact statement process, and we will be updating the conceptual finance plan. And in 2023, we will be continuing the tolling discussion that we have to go before both legislatures and both state transportation commission members. And finally, we will be applying for federal grant funding opportunities. So I think that's my last slide, hopefully. It is. So I will take any questions or concerns that you may have. Once again, this has been a tremendous partnership, and the Port of Portland has been tremendously supportive of our program, giving us great input and lending expertise to a number of issues. So I do thank you for that. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. First, thanks for the feedback on our report, which we're all very proud of here. I just want to say I appreciate you coming and giving us a presentation with so much detail. I really appreciate how much community feedback you're seeking and the number of ways you've done that. The one piece that gives me concern as I look across the country at projects is the cost of that projects are coming in at are much higher than anyone anticipated when they began. We certainly are in a position with this project to take that into account now, since the budgets haven't been settled. So I appreciate, again, your efforts to really dig into those numbers as you move forward here, and I think that'll be an important step. Any comments or questions from others? Commissioner Alexander?
Yes, thank you. First of all, Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for the detail and the scope of the presentation. I want to offer a comment and then ask a question. The comment would be this is huge work, and in some ways it's one of two very major infrastructure projects that are taking place within our region. And I have to say that the approach that you've taken to community outreach is very encouraging and validating. And I have monitored the composition of the voices who are providing input to you. These are very detailed and in some ways complex discussions. When you begin to balance the project with equity and climate considerations, there are lots of lenses and filters. And one of the takeaways for me is the ability to avoid what I call the rule of outrage, where somebody is so outraged by the approach that's being taken that they want to be outside of the dialogue as opposed to in it. You've managed to keep all of these voices of stakeholders in this in very constructive ways. So I want to acknowledge that because it's not commonplace here. There are places where it's not happening, and it's very clear to community where they are coming to the table as true partners versus potential adversaries. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to ask if you have seen or if there is any belief that the role the federal government, Department of Transportation, may or may not play in the funding and the advancement of this over time. This project goes well over a decade, and there have been a number of moving vans in and out of the White House since then, and the Department of Transportation and others. And is it your sense that that partnership and that desire on the part of folks within the Beltway to support projects like this is going to be consistent and sustainable? Thank you.
So thank you, Commissioner. Those are great questions. First off, I want to address the community input, and we've been tremendously purposeful in that outreach, and I've reached out to not only friends of the project, but I've reached out to some of the harshest critics of this project to understand their take on this project and why they don't want to see it built. So we've been trying to take everyone's viewpoint into account. There are some folks we're going to agree to disagree with, but it doesn't mean that their views don't help shape where we go. So it's been a tremendously, I think, rewarding effort in reaching folks and getting folks involved. One of the capstone things that we will be doing as far as community involvement, we're hoping to create a community benefits agreement that will be a part of this program eventually. So folks will start seeing work on that over the next year or two. So that is also another key way in which we will be amplifying the community voices and the community needs and desires for this program. But the issue of the federal commitment to this. So I was in Washington, D.C. back at the end of February. We met with US DOT, myself and the Secretary of the Washington State DOT, as well as the Director of the Oregon DOT. And they are tremendously familiar with this project, and they are tremendously supportive that it gets built this time. They recognize the danger to the overall transportation system if we have a failure at this point. So some of the legislation and the grant language that was written is very favorable to projects like this. And this is a unique project in that, once again, it's a bi-state project. It has transit. It has it's multimodal. It has bike, walk. It is, it covers the gamut of transportation. So there's a lot of support to see this project get built. And our focus on equity and climate is right in alignment with the USDOT's current view of the world. So I think we're going to get great support out of Washington, D.C. as we move this project forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hollering?
Mr. Johnson, I just want to thank you for the work that you've been doing. I know that the bridge may only be one level, but I think putting it together is kind of a three-tiered chess game. And I think right now we all need bridge builders, and thank you for playing that role. I think I know as you're looking at HOV and variable lanes and other things, but I think the key question is how confident are you in the support you're getting? I know the governor of Washington has been supportive, and WashDOT, and are you feeling like the connection with the Washington legislature is going to be supportive when we get to having to put all the funding pieces together? And I know we're that's a way down the road, but we can get pretty far along and then not be able to deliver at the end of the day if we don't have the funding pieces. So I know you're looking at a bit of a crystal ball, but are you feeling like you're getting better support on the Washington side?
So what the state of Washington did back this spring in their legislative session was tremendous support for the program. So as most folks know, the program ended the last time. The Columbia River Crossing ended in 2014 when the Washington legislature declined to take up funding the program. So it died there. This time, Washington they knew they had to come to the table first. So they did. So we have a commitment from the Washington state government to the tune of $1 billion to get this thing built. So that commitment is solid and in the bank. So now we will be going before the Oregon legislature in 2023 with a similar ask. So we've cleared one major hurdle in the state of Washington to move this program forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sunpeth?
Yes, this is really important work and really complicated work. So thank you for all the work that you've put in and your team has put in. Just to kind of piggyback on Sean's question, we are headed into a very interesting governor's race in the state of Oregon, and shifts perhaps in the composition of the legislature here. What are your efforts that you can discuss in terms of outreach so that as we go through changes, we have continued support going forward? So
we've been reaching out to campaigns to make ourselves available for conversations about the bridge, and their support across the major candidates to get the bridge built. It takes different formats and different forms. So those are issues that we will have to discuss. But overall, what we've seen and what we've heard is there is support to get it done this time from all of the major candidates for governor. So, but we will be reaching out to make sure they're informed of where we are at and where we hope to be next year, because it will take the support of the executive level to get this thing done and through the Oregon legislature next year. So a very important step, and we are priming ourselves for those conversations.
Anything further? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, for your time.
All right, thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you. We'll move on to our consent items. I ask if any commissioner wants a presentation on the consent agenda. Okay, the titles of the consent items are Microsoft Enterprise Software Agreement and Personal Services Contract, On-Call Environmental Site Assessment, Site Characterization, Auditing, Sampling, and Remediation Consulting Services, Port of Portland Properties. Now call for a motion and second for approval of the consent items.
Move to approve the consent items in block.
I second.
Thank you. All those, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our first action item will be presented by Jen Bies. Is that? Bees, thank you. If Ms. Bees, if you could introduce the first agenda item.
Okay, so I'm filling in for Dan Pippinger while he's out at a conference. So. Oh, thank you. Am I live now? Yes, great. So this project is a strategic move to reduce congestion on the PDX roadway. We can't expand the width of the roadway, so this is really about redirecting some vehicles like Uber, taxis, Lyft, and others into recently vacated areas in our parking garages. There are also other benefits that this project will deliver to maximize the value and functionality of the roadway. And so Eric Forsyth, Engineering Project Manager, is here to present it.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Can you all hear me okay? Next slide, please. Morning, everyone. Today I'm here to request approval of an award of a public improvement contract to Essex General Construction Incorporated for the PDX parking garages P1 and P2 modifications project in the amount of approximately $2.66 million. Next slide, please. Locations of the contract scope are shown on the graphic before you. From left to right, we're modifying existing lower roadway signage to our islands. We're repurposing levels 1 and 2 of our short-term parking garage and level 1 of our long-term parking garage to meet current and future needs. Next slide, please. Contract scope of work is listed. As you can see here before you, we're repurposing existing floor plates of our garages to reduce congestion of our lower roadway and repurpose the facility. Next slide, please. This is a rendering that our architect produced, looking from a passenger's perspective, coming across lower roadway into the P1 level 1 floor plate, looking to the northeast. You can see here the taxi queue, Uber and Lyft. There's going to be motorcycle parking and some pedestrian corridors for people to move safely back and forth on level 1 of our garages. Next slide, please. Overall project schedule is shown here. As you can see, we were before you in March of 2021 for the wayfinding signage project. That work is currently wrapping up in our tunnels and existing elevator cores. We've been designing for this project and seek approval for the public improvement contract today. Construction will conclude summer of 2023. Next slide, please. Budget and funding are shown here. Funding is from the Port Cost Center for this contract. The port's goal for small business enterprise participation was set at 16%. we're almost doubling that goal with participation of close to 31%. Ramsey Signs is a small business enterprise, and they're going to be doing our signage work on this contract. Contingency is considered reasonable, set at about 8%. Moving into this final phase of work, it's 8% based on the remaining amount of project cost. Next slide, please. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate thinking about how we use the space in a better way now that we've been able to move so much out of those spaces. My question really is just around safety. We'll have lots more people crossing the road now as we think about this, and so want to make sure that we're thinking about safety for people crossing the road in front of what will remain a lot of traffic for there.
Yeah, it's a good concern. We're going to be potentially reconfiguring our wayfinding signage to encourage people to use our tunnels from bag claim, get customers, travelers down into the tunnels and moving across underground and then up into level 1 of P1 so they can catch a taxi or a Lyft ride. So that's coming. It's currently under planning and design right now, but that's the direction that we're heading right now, knowing that some passengers and customers will still cross at grade. It's going to be a multifaceted approach in this case.
Thank you. Commissioner Nemi has a question.
Thank you, Madam President. I do appreciate the thinking about ways to improve the traffic around the PDX terminal. My question is around, I mean, this is space that could be used to rent out for parking, which can generate revenue to pay for the port services. So what will be the plan to be able to make sure that these big corporations like Uber and Lyft are paying for these renovations?
Currently, I don't think I can answer that question very effectively. We do generate revenue from Uber and Lyft, but I'm unsure of the funding mechanism for that.
Eric, why don't I do a phone a friend here?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
So we do have Commissioner Nemi, we do have a fee structure for Uber and Lyft that is, I believe, $2 in and $2 out. But it is actually a great revenue producer for us. We also have sufficient capacity now where the loss here in this project will not cause us to have overflow demands. We have sufficient in the new structure, sufficient parking. So we should be able to maintain the Uber and Lyft capacity and fee structure such that essentially it goes into the Port Cost Center and it will be funding this work. As Eric mentioned in his intro, that this is being funded by the Port Cost Center, which is parking and Uber and Lyft and roadway revenue, not affiliated with the airline cost center.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does answer my question. I guess this is an additional expense. I don't know if we'll be contemplating any increase in those rates for them or keeping it the same.
Yeah, Commissioner, it's Curtis. We haven't contemplated increasing those rates at this time, although, you know, that is up to us to work through maintaining that sustainability in the Port Cost Center, and I expect we'll continue to look at that. I believe we're on a few-year contract here. But we'll have to follow up with you, Commissioner, on how long that contract lasts, but that is essentially a ball that's in our court. The concept here is much like for folks who've traveled in Seattle, to move those Uber, Lyft, and taxis out of the roadway and give you some flexibility and make the roadway flow better for folks who are in their own vehicles, and also be able notionally to stack up essentially the Uber and Lyft vehicles in that garage. So, ideally, it will not affect revenue in a negative way. In the long run, hopefully we'll be able to see what travel patterns look like and adjust accordingly.
Well,
Thank you.
I just want to say that this is part of the experience, the customer service, improving customer service, but also I'd like to ask in your budget designing, when it's come down to executions, have we thought out about the signage? We're directing passengers if this is, where to go for to get that, Uber service or the new parking garage?
Yeah, and that's included in the scope to get people moving from bag claim over to P1 level 1. We're reconfiguring the messaging to get travelers to focus on the direction that they need to go for this new configuration. So it's all included.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Move to approve the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Jen, I think you're up for the next one as well.
Yes. So the airlines formed a consortium to manage the receipt and delivery of fuel for all aircraft at PDX. The consortium is a fuel farm to the northwest of the airport where fuel comes in via pipeline. We're entering into a long-term deal since PDX Fuel needs to make substantial capital investments. Those investments also deliver on some of our priorities around seismic resiliency and future accommodation of sustainable aviation fuel. We also negotiated reimbursement for all the work we've done as the underground fuel system as part of PDX Next. So Willie Wilcoxon is here, Senior Manager of Airline Affairs and Terminal Leasing, to present the business terms for the recommendation.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. Madam President, Commissioners, Port Executive Team, I'm really happy to be here in person. Before I begin, I'd just like to take a quick moment to recognize and introduce Lloyd Landreth, who is in attendance today on behalf of PDX Fuel, who we're doing this deal with. He's traveled all the way from Oklahoma. Just wanted to relay, Lloyd, can you raise your hand so we can all stare at you for a second? Great partner over the last couple of years. I appreciate him working with our very own David Ashton and myself. Appreciate him being here. Madam President, after my presentation, Lloyd would like to come up here and address and make a few comments to the commission, if that's okay. Okay, next slide, please. Won't spend too much time on the history. Jen covered that. PDX Fuel owns the storage and delivery system here at PDX. They have a lease and an easement. The lease covers all of the above ground. So you see the tank farm with those 3 tanks, the associated buildings surrounding that, and of course the north and south load rack. What those are generally is a gas station. So we have big fuel trucks that pull up, fill up, and be deployed at our PDX campus where the hydrant system is not there. So like remain overnight positions, your trans center with cargo, etc. PDX Fuel does not have any employees here. They use third-party operators. We have 2 right now. It's Menzies and Prime Flight. Both operators, both entities have an operating agreement with PDX that are in compliance with our workplace initiative and minimum wage requirement. Their lease does expire this fall. They do have a small little term left, but when they came to us a couple of years ago wanting to make a sizable investment to their facilities here, obviously here we are today, and that's what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is just a higher view of the tank farm up on the north side. The small blocks down on the south and northeast side are the load racks that I just talked about. Next slide, please. So this new lease solves for a few things, and I'll take the important nuggets out of here because I know you guys have read the agenda item. The long-term lease gives them term to amortize costs associated with the significant investment that they're making here at PDX. They have a robust capital project to include a lot of things that are important for both the port and PDX Fuel. There's critical component upgrades. There's a lot of fuel pumps, electrical systems that have been there for a long time. I mean, back when Curtis and I had hair. I mean, they've been there for a long time. So, there's a safety aspect of that, right? To where sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Bad, really. There's a safety aspect. There's an efficiency aspect associated with that too. They're going to reduce their utility costs. I mean, it's a win all around. They're going to modernize the facility. A lot of the buildings out there are fairly temporary. They're undersized, especially with their plans of putting new tanks in there. Resiliency, a huge win for us. They're going to follow all the state and local codes. They're going to follow all relevant industry standards. Being aware of their design and construction with the specific site soil at this site here at PDX being in the Cascadia subduction zone. And lastly, with our resiliency, they're going to do a pre and post construction seismic vulnerability kind of assessment, and they'll share that information with the port. So resiliency, very important for the port and PDX Fuel. And lastly, I know there's a lot of things up there. We've heard about sustainable aviation fuel, alternative fuels, SAF. It's not widespread yet. In fact, Jen and her folks are working on a few things right now. We thought it was important that their capital project included infrastructure to support SAF in the future. So we won't need that, in the near term. We don't know that yet. But in the interim, they could use that as an alternate fuel acceptance outside of the pipeline, if that makes sense. Let's see. We also executed a reimbursement for construction and for the costs associated with our port projects, the extension, Concourse B, the current terminal core. There are a lot of costs associated with the fuel system that our projects are doing. This construction and reimbursement agreement sets forth payment timing and options. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're getting between 26 and 28 million as soon as 90 days from now and as far away as the end of next calendar year to pay back our projects for the costs associated with what we've done to their fuel system. Shared community benefit, just real quick, small business participation. We think it's great. They're doing a large scale capital project. It's going to extend over a year or two. We've had several conversations with PDX Fuel, Kimberly and her team. PDX is a unique airport that has a dedicated team to small business part. I'm biased, I guess. Port of Portland's awesome. But PDX Fuel is going to be working with them. They're super excited about it. We're excited about it. So we, that checks the box, and we're pretty happy about that. And finally, the community benefit. When we started this deal a couple of years ago, is relatively new to put something like that in a lease that we're doing, right? To where, Jen and her environmental team, we started just kind of brainstorming. Hey, what do we want to do? How do we want to move the needle? And at the end of the day, the Columbia Slough Watershed Council, here in our backyard, rose to the top of our list. So we actually brought Mr. Landreth and PDX Fuel and a lot of port staff, and we went and talked to them and said, hey, what are you doing? And what do you want to do? And where do you want to go? At the end of the day, the community benefit to this lease, we asked the Watershed Council, hey, over the next 2-3 years, which is when PDX Fuel is going to be doing their construction, what kind of projects do you guys have? What do you want to do? They gave us a list of 5 or 6, and PDX Fuel is doing 50 to 100% funding of all the projects. So, we think that's great. There is a funding agreement that we have reviewed and we're quite pleased with. And so that's part of this overall package as well. Next slide, please. I've covered a lot of this with my rambling, but I guess the one point of this slide deck is all the rental rates associated with this were actually probably the easiest part of this deal, just because we based the rental rates on the fair market value based upon our appraisal here at the airport every 3 years. We just did it, so we're using those rates because that's what we do on our campus. Next slide, please. So staff recommends the executive director's recommendation to enter into a long-term agreement with PDX Fuel and get this sucker going. I could answer any questions before I bring Lloyd up here to talk to you guys.
Thank you. Any questions?
Madam President, if
Mr. Alexander?
great. Again, Mr. Willoxen, thank you very much. And I understand this is an extension of a current lease arrangement. And as you spoke about the small business set-aside targets, it's sort of in discussion. I'm interested as to what the performance has been on the existing contract
For PDX Fuel across the country,
as it relates to Portland.
Portland, we're hoping for double digits. Right now, all of their contract, and that's why I kind of mentioned that, you know, PDX is different because we actually have a specific team dedicated to that. They're not used to that. So we're trying to get 10+% of small business participation. You know, they're self-funding, it's their project. We don't have much to do with it, but they are engaged and they're willing to have as much small business participation as possible.
Is there a base of experience for measuring performance over from 2014 until today? Because I understand we have been in somewhat of a relationship prior to now, if this is a lease extension.
They haven't done any large scale projects like this, to be honest, Commissioner, to where, you know, this is a significant, you know, this is $100 million investment that they're making here at PDX. We haven't seen that size from them. So yeah, it's an amended and restated lease. We're putting components in that I've discussed today, but you know, we haven't done it with them here in regards to small business participation.
Well, it sounds as if this is something that would clearly benefit both parties, and I'd love to see some articulation of what success would look like.
Sure.
Within that metric. So
Yep.
I'm kind of betting on the promise as opposed to betting on the data.
Right.
So
No, and I
just want to
appreciate it.
acknowledge that.
And that's why, and I appreciate your comment. And we've had several calls with that, just in its own entirely. Kimberly and her team, we've actually had 2 or 3. So yes, it's important to both sides for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Wilcoxon?
Can I bring Lloyd up?
Please.
Tell them how wonderful I've been, Lloyd.
There you go. Good morning, everybody, and those on Teams as well. I'm Lloyd Landreth. If you detect an accent, and as you mentioned, I'm from Oklahoma, but I do have an Oregon connection. So in my prior life, I worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they sent me to Corvallis to grad school for a graduate program. So I love your state, and even though I flew out here yesterday from Tulsa, I always enjoy coming out here. I've done this work for fuel consortiums, mostly on the environmental legal side since 1998, starting at SFO, and primarily, again, the focus I have is on environmental. The project that Willie discussed for upgrading and expanding this fuel system on the storage side is something that the airlines are 100% support of. We've got the funding for it, and we're committed to following it through to the end. The fuel consortiums like you have at PDX, there's 53 of those around the nation. You're one of those 53, and they are a way for the airlines to collaborate and fund projects like this. So it's a good tried and true model that works for everybody. The thing I wanted to mention is, in coming out here, normally Mark Bordeaux, who's the chairman from Delta Airlines, he chairs the fuel consortium. Normally Mark would be here. He wasn't able to attend. Mark was very key in working with Willie in the port in putting this lease forward, as well as David Ashton, who Willie acknowledged earlier, and also Maxie Lyons, who's the general counsel. So Maxie does all the contracts. I get to do the environmental piece. The PDX, as was mentioned by Mr. Johnson earlier, is a really important airport for the airlines, both domestically and internationally. So you guys do. I agree, you have a great airport, and we're happy to do this project and support that. We've worked really well with your staff. This is a collaborative with some airports in the 53 that we work with. It may not be quite as collaborative. This is one that is. So we really, you all are over a great group of people. We enjoy working with them. The Columbia Slough Watershed Council piece, So in acknowledging your shared prosperity goals, as was mentioned by Willie, that's something that is newer to us as fuel consortiums. You know, we're building infrastructure to support and help the airport have a reliable fuel source and grow. And this component is something that was brought to us by David and Willie, and we are supportive of it. I met with Heather King yesterday, who's the new executive director for the council, and really impressed with her vision and I think what she brings to the table. So just wanted to give you, even though Mark's face is better than mine, I wanted to give you a face with a name. So with PDX Fuel, so there, it's just something, this project is, you're going to get a more reliable storage facility. It's going to be more environmentally friendly. On the electronic side, the controls and ways to manage monitoring fuel throughout the system is going to be much improved. So it's 100% a win-win for you all. So we're excited about doing this. This is, I don't want to say it's a long overdue, but it's definitely something that, as we see all the improvements here, this is an internal piece that's not as visible, that's going to really match what you've done on the optics of the rest of the airports. And I think that's the high points. If there's anything I can answer, any questions or anything, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, thank you for that. I want to say I appreciate the commitment to our way of working now and considering the community.
Mm-hmm.
It will be important for us to show folks who want to partner with us in the future that others have stepped up and done it and been successful with our shared prosperity mission and initiatives. So any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Schrader.
So with some of these new eco fuels that we don't know exactly everything about yet, will they be future compatibility with them in the future if there's changes, or does the whole system have to be changed out?
It's a really good question. And Willie mentions sustainable aviation fuel, which we refer to as SAF. And we're going to have the option to, right now, it's basically a trucked product, and we specify that it can be dropped in. So it meets the same specs as the fossil fuel Jet A. Should they change in the future to, hydrogen footprint or something else, then we would have, as an industry, and again with 53 consortiums looking at this, regularly, we would probably have projects and be before you again saying, hey, we want to build this thing to now accommodate what we see as the fuel of the future. But we do the best we can to anticipate, and as we see, in this case, SAF becoming more available commercially, we want to make sure we can use it here at PDX. So it's a little bit of a moving target, if that kind of makes sense. But yeah, we do the best we can on it. So good question. Mm-hmm.
I just have a quick questions about the term of the lease. Is 20 years plus 5-year options. Is it normal compared to other airports?
Yeah, it's typical. Typically, we will go 30 or less, and so in this one, we just did a 20 plus 2 options. Typical with this type of lease.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner.
It's clear that you have a wonderful partnership and working relationship, and I want to thank you both for that. Thank you for flying out here to be here. I know there's a lot of teamwork that went behind putting this together, so thank you to both your teams for the work there, and obviously you taking the time to fly here is a sense of commitment. So with that, Madam President, I would move to approve the executive director's recommendation for the PDX Fuel Company lease.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for vote for the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last agenda item is a lay berthing lease, and I'll ask Keith Levitt to please. Oh, okay.
Jen and Scott, I'm putting the thumb on you quickly because TSCC is due to start. So thank you.
So the federal government maintains a fleet of cargo ships in reserve for national emergency. Need to be This deal is to bring some of those ships to our currently underutilized marine facilities to generate revenue and support our nation's emergency response network. Scott Kilgo, Senior Manager of Marine Real Estate Development, is here to present the recommendation.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy to be here in person. In short, this is a unique opportunity with a shortage of berths on the West Coast. There is a need that the federal government has for this vessel storage that creates an opportunity for us to direct negotiate to accommodate up to 5 vessels. And basically with their funding, both revenue and capital funding, we expect to improve our berths and be in the lay berth business with these underutilized berths for years to come.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Strader, you look like you may have a question.
Pardon me. I was just kind of curious on the improvements themselves in the commitments. Once we enter into this agreement, is that something that they'll be completely utilized at that period of time? Is there any flexibility that the port has if things change in the future, or are they just tied into that very specific role as a labor?
Sure. Can we go to the third slide? There we go. 2 of them, the slides at the top, have basically about $4.5 million in investment. That's electrical, fencing, and mooring. So that is those are all improvements that we will benefit from after this initial term, and that will make us much more competitive to be and secure additional labor business in the future. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, it's a great deal for us. It's fully funded with the feds, so I wouldn't expect we would want to change because it's going to enhance our ability to use them in operations and revenue generation. And the bottom berth is actually up to $10 million in investment with an actual piling and ramp so that equipment can be driven on and off. So again, it's really an exciting expansion at the federal with federal funding that'll just position us to have more flexibility and more productivity out of these in the future. Does that address your concerns, Commissioner?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
To
Commissioner Holly?
approve the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. And our meeting's adjourned.
Happy trails, Commissioner Levy.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bob. These chairs have a panel. I can't see take over.